Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Transcription services provided by transcribeme.com. Episode 541. A Brave New Ad. Monday, April 29th, 2019. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob North. Thanks for joining us. Putting aside the fact that the connected TV is in the process of changing the way that television will be bought, sold, and targeted, will it also level the playing field and open the door to more direct-to-consumer opportunities? Tonight, we'll discuss. Also, what's up for Hulu now? The Brave browser's latest monetization plan? What happens if Instagram removes visible like counts? Plus, this week's Ad Fail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the Vice President, Digital Marketing for Westfield, Mr. Chris Backus. Chris, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Bob. It's great to see you again, and it's also great to not be a listener this time, although I will definitely be listening as always.
I love it when the people who come on the show listen to the program as well. It's awesome. Now, next up, we have the co-founder of business transformation consultancy, the HMS Beagle, as well as the CEO of Massami Hair, Ms. Lynn Power. Hi, Lynn. Lynn, are you there?
Hey, sorry. Thanks for having me.
We were riding the mute, I guess, which is good. You're doing the right thing. And finally, he's the Executive Vice President for Business Intelligence at DeVries Global. We say hello to Mr. Colby Vogt. Colby, what's happening?
Hey, Bob. Happy to be back. This is my second time, and I loved the first time, so I'm happy you invited me back.
Oh, my God. You were great the first time. We're really, really pleased to have you back in the program. Well, let's just jump right into the topics. And first up, we all know that addressable TV advertising is coming. We've talked about it many times on this program, but too often when discussing it, we envision only the movement of big brands from broadcast to digital streaming and what that will involve. And we rarely, if ever, consider how this fundamentally may change how ads are bought, and that it potentially levels the playing field for direct-to-consumer and challenging brands or challenger brands to enter the market. Lynn, does a world of connected TVs give these smaller, disruptive brands long or longish term marketplace advantages, or is that overstated? What are your beliefs about this?
Well, it is interesting, and I do think you're right. Like, connected TV feels like it's kind of a no-brainer at this point. It feels like it's actually should be here already, right?
Yeah, we've only been talking about canoes since forever.
Right? Like, it feels like, well, of course it should be there. And oh, it's not there yet. Okay, so there's that. It's interesting. The DTC brands obviously have a really effective playbook, but that playbook has gotten more expensive over the last year or two as digital acquisition has, the ROI has become a bit challenging. But at the same time, while connected TV feels like a no-brainer, it's kind of, a page out of that playbook, right? It's really zoning in on very specific consumers, obviously, having being addressable and being able to identify your consumers in a very precise way. I do think the problem is going to be the cost, because from what I understand, there's going to be a pretty huge premium for addressable TV. And I always hear everyone talking about, the DTCs like they're this really scrappy, hungry challenger thing. But then when you look at who they are, it's like Dollar Shave Club, a $1 billion brand bought by Unilever. And you've got, Bonobos bought by Walmart and Jet bought by Walmart. So
But when you think about it, though, Lynn, I mean, yeah, they may be huge, giant companies at this point, but the reality is they all started off as scrappy, disruptive startups using these types of tools, these direct-to-consumer opportunities that were available online, and bringing that to TV gives them a huge advantage over anybody who's used to doing completely reach and frequency type advertising. It's a completely different game, and it potentially gives them the opportunity to lock up that market.
it does. I guess I'm just making a distinction between the ones that are already the huge conglomerates, and we call them this kind of scrappy DTC type companies, which they are. But when they're bought by large companies, they have the benefit of, being to leverage that scale as well as their scrappiness. But versus like the true DTC startups that are potentially going to have a harder time dealing with the cost, because it's not cheap. And so, yes, the bigger DTCs will win, I think, ultimately in this. And they will be able to leverage their knowledge of data and consumers for sure. But then again, like we're talking about win versus who, the big corporations who, as you know, from like Joseph's book, right? They're all dead anyway. They're dying, not dead. So it's sort of like, feels like an unfair fight.
Yeah, it really does. Chris, I'd love you to weigh in as well. I mean, you handle digital marketing. You've probably been looking at this and kind of maybe even a little worried about it. What are your thoughts?
I wouldn't say worried. Everything in the media space is an opportunity. And I think what's even interesting within DTC and certainly addressable TV is, the fact that you could get to a closer idea of tracking conversion, seeing where that sales really coming from. You're getting smarter with your advertising. And I think every advertiser wants to be smarter with their advertising. I also think that, we always really focus on the direct conversion of things when in fact there's a lot of indirect conversion of transactions that happen because not everything's e-commerce. And of course, I'm speaking from a place of not being e-commerce, but even the e-commerce sales don't always necessarily have a direct linear attribution model all the time too. There can be different devices, there could be, failures in tracking mechanisms and things like that happen along the way. But this space really does provide an opportunity to really see how performance is and to really get an idea if it's really creating the revenue, sales, interest that's beyond simply the awareness plays that have typically been really within the TV space. And I think that's what makes it interesting. I do believe Lynn is absolutely correct, saying, it is mainly a lot of the big players because the cost is fairly prohibitive to go ahead and say, buy a portion of that media to go ahead and participate in the space, because it is still a fairly limited space, which means it's going to still be at a premium cost piece. So we'll see how it evolves. But like I said, there's a great opportunity with basically another way to be smarter on a channel we know very well.
That's the cost factor that Lynn mentioned, and then getting into what you were talking about, Chris, which is that we're going to have the ability to measure and see whether or not this is effective. It leads me to think, Colby, that this could all blow up in everybody's face. I mean, if I've always said that once TV becomes completely measurable, we may find out that TV doesn't work at all, and that's a scary proposition.
Well, it is pretty scary. I'll just address the cost part that everyone's talking about. I think the flip side, I think most marketers believe TV works today. I think, the origin of how TV worked is probably changing a lot because of the consumption of younger generations. But the premise that buying impressions is more expensive certainly is the case. But in the traditional sense, you've got brands that are paying for, let's say, 1 million viewers, of which, maybe a tenth, maybe a quarter are actually their target audience. So I actually don't think the cost is that big of a piece of conversation in this decision. I think it's, as you put it, the scrappy marketers who really get to know who their target is beyond just a demographic. I think they're really going to come out winners. And I think absolutely the market's going to change.
Lynn, what do you think about that? I mean, it's just like there is an argument to be made that even though the ads are more expensive, the results could potentially be great. And also, you have the opportunity to target your audience more effectively, thus eliminating waste from your advertising spend. So, wouldn't that be something that if you had, say, a few $1 million aside for marketing as a result of a funding round, you might not want to go this way?
I mean, I think, of course, the argument is they're going to be more targeted impressions, and that's why they cost more, and that makes sense to some level. I think the reality, though, is it's still not a cheap portion of your marketing spend, and these DTC guys are used to an acquisition mindset, and an ROI mindset, and I don't think unless you're a very, very large, well-funded DTC brand, that's spending for the precision targeting is just, it's not going to be something that's going to be easy to stomach.
Let me flip the coin here for a little bit, because when we talk about this, we're talking primarily about the direct-to-consumer brands and the challenger brands. But what about the big brands? I mean, Chris, when we're talking about this move, this transformation, are the big brands at risk? And also, how does this change the way bigger established brands should approach television advertising in terms of both buying and the types of creative that they use? Should they be embracing the DTC model a little bit more, I don't know, enthusiastically, or is it basically a branding question still, and you just need to figure out how to get reach and frequency?
I think some of the bigger brands have played in the space to a certain extent already in some innovative ways. I kind of go back to some days when I worked at Team Detroit for the Ford account. And, we were doing some things there with, I believe it was TiVo and some of the interactive TV pieces, so that, you could really get a more connected experience with the customers that were watching their TiVos. And so you had a way to, create more brand awareness, more product awareness, hopefully, and the whole reason was more intention and consideration to really create an interactive, playful way for people to act with your advertising instead of just the passive way that TV traditionally is. And so, like I said, it provides another outlet to go ahead and be more targeted. Yes, targeting always comes at a cost, but you always measure that cost at, is it really leading to a greater conversion? In other words, I'm willing to go ahead and pay that extra cost because I'm getting a great return on my result of it. But if I'm spending a lot on that cost and it's at just a higher expense per CPM, then it doesn't necessarily really have much benefit to it. So you kind of throttle back and you get less targeted. We all play those games in advertising. But I think the big players can play in this space too. There's no big or little guy thing really within DTC based advertising.
Let me clarify, because I don't think my question is that whether or not big brands should play in this space. If I give that impression, I'm sorry. It's more about how do they use this? I mean, do they continue along the path that they've always used when it comes to television, which is, this is about awareness building, and we need to get the word out to as many people as possible at a frequency that makes an impression on them? Or do they embrace more wholeheartedly this direct marketing angle? I mean, you made a case for making direct marketing a part of this, but how much of a part of this, and how do you recommend brands proceed in this space?
Well, Bob, conversion could happen many different ways. And so, yes, a DTC brand's usually trying to direct a specific sale within the experience that you are interacting with that brand or getting more aware about that brand. Lead generation is still a big piece of it too. Just to go back to the automotive example, or honestly, the shopping center example, is you are trying to go ahead and create interest and awareness and consideration and trying to bring people into the fold to, visit a dealership or visit a center. And, that's not always a direct transactional sale at that point, but it still is a lead, which is its own kind of DTC or conversion. I know I'm using conversion a little bit looser here, but I think that's what a lot of different types of plays on this model allow for. So I might just really kind of be bringing people into more of a lead gen stream than necessarily a sales conversion stream at that point, because the sales conversion might happen somewhere else.
And Colby, would you agree? I mean, what other advice would you give to anybody in the big brand space about how to manage this?
I think the biggest thing is that with this connected TV model, really, if you're going to take it to the next level, you're not just saying, look, I'm buying a more targeted impression. You actually should be saying, I want to send the right message to the right audience. So instead of blanketing the same message to everyone, I should be sending a different type of message to maybe a time constrained mom versus a teenage kid. They may both be my target, but the ability to target a different message to different audiences, I think, is really where the power will come. I think, the expensive impressions is one thing, but again, to communicate in a way that feels very bespoke and almost individualized to the respondent, I think is really where the power is going to come eventually.
Well, I want to move on, and I want to talk next about Hulu. And I think it's pretty clear to all of us that Hulu has been a fairly weird animal since its inception, being independent, but jointly owned at the same time by all of the major broadcasters at one point. But now, after more than a few exits by a few owners, for the first time there is a majority owner, Disney. And if the news is correct from this past week, and Comcast is about to sell their stake, well, Disney could become the sole owner. And that leaves a question, Chris. How does this change this particular streaming service, and what will Hulu likely become as a result? What are your predictions about this move by Disney to take full and total ownership of the company?
A nice little light question here in Hollywood where I'm sitting at right now.
That's why you got it.
It's funny. I read a lot of different perspectives on this. Of course, Bob, you always provide great show notes, but there's also a lot of places to kind of look at what the interpretation is here. There's so many ways to go within what's happening within Hulu. As you shared, Disney is concentrating its ownership. It wants to buy this 30% stake that Comcast has. It gives them basically a majority stake, which is really what they're interested in. And they're already made a lot of headway within that with this whole Disney Fox merger. So, they're in a position of strength. Comcast's big question is, do they sell because they're going to get kind of the short-term gains and benefits of their investment, which do already exist within the market value of this transaction? But down the road, that value could, of course, increase significantly more. It also kind of could be a different thing within the content play, and giving up the majority stake solely really to Disney and Fox merger. And really what happens with Hulu, obviously Disney becomes a much more powerful player within what happens with Hulu at the end of the day. I think it's funny. Lynn, I think you brought up Joe earlier that, I think you referred to this always as the rerun network, or somebody did on your show before, I remember back in the day. And, I think everyone's become the rerun network. But honestly, I think I just saw that Netflix, their biggest watch show is The Office.
The Office and Friends. The Office and Friends make most of the reasons why people subscribe and keep subscribing to these platforms. It's crazy.
Yeah. So they're very rich in content. I think duplication content doesn't matter as much anymore because a lot of the content's kind of showing up in many places. People are buying multiple streaming services. I think what's really interesting though for Hulu and what happens with Disney Plus is there's a lot of conversation, and I'll agree on the side of, Disney Plus being kind of this family kid more oriented space, and Hulu becoming more of the adult Disney or the adult kind of programming sounds a little ridiculous, especially when you see what just happened at the box office this weekend, where I'm sure a ton of adults made up for the $1.2 billion of Endgame revenue. Fortunately, I was able to sit out of it. My kids only went on a birthday party, but I didn't have to sit through 3 hours of that thing and not having to pee or something like everyone's talking about. But Hulu's got a lot of benefits here. And I don't think people are just going to buy one of these services and feel like they solve kind of like the family programming or the adult programming thing. And the reality is the content broadens so much, especially the Disney Universe content and the Fox content, that, anything could be a family, and all these systems really kind of break it out by the content categories anyway. And so at the end of the day, I could see Hulu, Disney Plus being a very strong package kind of deal. And so, it's a way to sell both of those services combined, maybe obviously have some different advantages that you get within combined packaging, something, of course, cable companies have used a lot of times. We're going to see a lot of kind of different plays on how this go ahead and works out. But it's also a big benefit for advertisers in the sense that it really, well, the companies to advertisers, I should say first, because now they have a lot of great content. They have a couple of great platforms. Disney Plus launching in September is going to, bring in a lot of customers on that channel. It's going to be a very desirable channel, as we know, with, parents and families and people who love comic books, which seems to be everybody now.
Do we know for a fact
really
that
going to be great targeting?
Do we know for a fact whether Disney Plus is going to be running ads? I'm not really sure about that. Does it give us any opportunity to reach into families or not?
Well, we'll see. I mean, I don't believe I've heard anything specifically yet saying that they're going to do advertising per se through the programming interface itself. Listen, there's always the opportunity of that, and there's always opportunity of kind of expanding that. I mean, isn't Netflix, I believe, right now testing ad units within even people binge watching TV shows? So, the systems are going to evolve. Whether they do it right out the gate, which I'm old enough to remember when cable launched and didn't have advertising on it, and that was the big saving grace of it. So, everything changes, and the advertisers, we all eventually show up, and you could argue maybe ruin some things. So at the end of the day, though, Hulu, I think it becomes a more advantageous piece because it's even gonna have a lot of that branch within the Disney universe. The content development piece alone. Think about Disney Studios, the opening up of some of that production capabilities. There's some talk that Bob Iger's already made about, Disney Plus kind of is a great platform to use all the content engine that Disney has, but also could be something that's an advantage for Hulu as well within its own programming changes and tries to become more dominant within that space. So, there's a lot of great opportunities here, I think, for the company, and there's no doubt why Disney's trying to make this move and really wants that equity stake. And I think there's a lot of benefit from a content standpoint, and ultimately, at the end of the day, content's king. That's going to open up a lot of doors from an advertising perspective too. Whether that's at launch or down the road, who knows? But it's at least there right now for Hulu.
Lynn, I like what Chris set up here. I mean, he teed up a pretty wide berth on what the scenario could be, but is there a case to be made that Hulu, who has been over the past few months, according to analysts and according to the actual movement of the price, has been going down in price, and a lot of the analysts are kind of speculating that they're moving eventually toward a free model that would be completely ad supported, which seems like a natural evolution for them. So could Hulu potentially be the ad-based platform versus Disney Plus, which is the subscription-based platform, which is also, I might add, a very cheap subscription price?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. And I could see that happening for sure. I do like what Chris was saying, though, a lot about, it is about the content at the end of the day. And anecdotally, I think consumers are just being a little more resistant to having, 7, 8 different subscriptions that they're paying for. I don't even know how many anymore. And so I think that the idea of having free with ads for Hulu, might be able to circumvent that, because I think there is a little bit of subscription fatigue going on. And if something's going to get cut, if you're looking at you're paying for, Showtime and Amazon and Netflix, et cetera, what might get cut? Well, Hulu, maybe. So maybe they know more than we don't about their consumers. Maybe their consumers aren't that satisfied.
Is there a possibility that, is there any scenario where you would see Hulu being absorbed by Disney Plus in some way, shape, or form? Just take the technology or rate it for parts?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's sort of the natural evolution of things, right? Like there's expansion and then there's shrinking. And at some point, if Hulu, the brand itself, isn't offering enough value to monetize it, whether through advertising or whether through subscription, then yeah, it's going to end up just getting folded in. I mean, that's what happens with lots of brands that get acquired.
Colby, there's one thing about this that for me is most interesting, which is whether or not this move of Disney taking over helps advertisers and marketers in any conceivable way. I mean, obviously, they see a plan forward in taking complete control of Hulu. I mean, my speculation, of course, as I've already said, is that they want to make it the ad-supported platform and give them an opportunity to reach that market while preserving their Disney Plus market as a pure subscription. But does that help advertisers? Does that make them the platform more desirable, or is it in some way taint it in any way? I'm not really sure where to go with this, but your thoughts.
Yeah, it's all going to depend. I think Len said it right. It's going to depend on the consumer and how valuable they find the content, right? So if they keep putting out content that the consumer values and they can accept the fact that they're being served ads, then I think it's a perfect, triple play for Disney to be able to have, the different types of content and the different platforms, one that's ad supported and one that's subscription supported. So, I think it could certainly work, but it all depends on the type of content that they're serving up at the end of the day.
And speaking about that content, Colby, I mean, think about it. Well, there's got to be so much overlap between the two platforms. Is that a problem, or is that an asset? Is that something that they can actually say, you can watch this movie on both platforms, only one's ad-supported, one's not, or do they need to work harder at differentiating Hulu with original content like they've been doing?
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to differentiate, right? Because otherwise you're gonna pick and choose which one you want, and I don't think you're going to want to subscribe to both. So they've got to figure out, which content lives in which platform at the end of the day. I think, some overlap may be okay to attract people, but that's absolutely mandatory to differentiate and give people the reason why they want to ultimately subscribe to both.
Chris, any last thoughts on this? I mean, you've heard what everybody else had to say. What are your final wrap-up thoughts on this subject?
Well, so I think back to this whole content play, that whether we have ad free or versus ad is might happen. Who knows? But the reality is that they have more content to play around with. They could go ahead and create special situations that maybe up its subscription basis. So maybe down the road, Disney decides to do kind of a Disney Plus trial on Hulu, so that attracts more subscribers into Disney Plus through the Hulu channel, or vice versa. So you have a lot of ways to go ahead and make these two companies kind of play off of each other. They're playing in the same type of space. They have a consumer that's willing to pay for streaming services. There's a lot of gain and a lot of opportunity to really kind of leverage both in a way to create more strength in the marketplace. Because, Hulu's still half of what Netflix is in the United States subscriber wise. Hulu just crossed 25 million. Netflix is close to 60 million right now. And it's still a Netflix spot, but you got Amazon gaining, you got AT&T with OTT, some play that they're looking at down the road too, that they kind of paused because Disney Plus was coming into market so cheap at $6.99. So a lot of things are going to change within the space, and everyone's looking for an advantage. So I think there's a strong case for Disney and Hulu here to be an advantage combo.
Well, moving on, Brave, the browser that's ad-free, has a new business model. It's basically advertising. If you agree to view ads that they serve when you're browsing on their browser, they will give you 70% of the revenue from that ad in the form of tokens that can then be donated to web content properties of your choice. So the scenario basically would go that you view an ad on their platform, you view an ad on their browser using their ad platform. You get 70% of the revenue that you can then give to, say, whatever publisher you want, maybe the BeanCast. It would be up to you, completely fine. Colby, is it an interesting twist on the bribe? Well, let's put it this way: it is an interesting twist on the bribe to view model, but does it make sense in the end? What are your thoughts about this move by Brave to start offering users a little bit of incentive to watch ads on the platform?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Everything at the end of the day is going to boil down to the type of user that Brave attracts. If it's purely the fact that they're getting some type of compensation for seeing the content, they may not be the right target for people that are hoping to see their content, right? So, they may not be the people that have the money ultimately to buy products. So, but the twist with Brave, from what I understand, and I don't have any personal experience with it yet, but the twist is that they also have some privacy controls that they give the user. So I can determine if I want cookies or if I don't want cookies, or how I want to actually be receiving content. And that part of it may actually make the browser a little more appealing to consumers, because we know that privacy, everyone seems to claim that privacy is really important to them. And so if that element of Brave is what's bringing in users, I think you may be able to have the right type of user that's on the browser right now. I think I heard that there's maybe like 4 million people that are using it at this point. So it's a good start. Obviously they've got a ways to go to catch up to the big boys, but I think 4 million at this stage suggests that they may be onto something.
It's interesting to me, though, that they're doing this at the same time that Google, with their Chrome browser, is starting to eliminate cookies entirely and is starting to potentially change the way that ads are bought and sold via their platform. So it's in a lot of ways, this is a huge opportunity for Brave that's showing up at their doorstep, because the big boy in the category is copying them in a lot of ways. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think it's, as you put it, the opportunity has kind of fallen on their lap, and I think they're taking advantage of it. And I think this is a look and see what happens. Early stages right now, but I think early stages suggest that they've taken this opportunity at the right time and that people are interested in it.
Lynn, there's something about this model that, at first glance, it doesn't really register. But when you think about it a little bit more deeply, the idea of giving the money to you, not to spend on yourself, but to spend on properties that you appreciate online, does that make this that much more appealing to a customer who's viewing an ad? And does it make them more amenable to the messaging that they're seeing as a result of that, in the sense that they want to support the brands that support the sites that they're interested in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of goes back to what Colby said in the beginning. It depends on who is their user. If their mindset is such that they get a good value exchange out of that and are happy to give their tokens or whatever they are, their funny money, to someone that they feel is a good cause, and that makes it a positive value exchange. And I didn't know the bit about the privacy, but that makes it more interesting as well, because that feels like a bigger story potentially. But or are they going to be people who are like, no, I want the tokens, you know what I mean? And therefore it's not going to resonate, because they feel like this is a low quality value exchange. I'm not going to watch advertising, which I hate, to get something, to accumulate fake money that's never going to go anywhere. So I think it just depends on how well do they know their consumer and their target, and how well this is actually going to work.
Well, speaking as a focus group of one, which is always the worst way to go, but as a focus group of one, when I first saw this in the article and saw what the plan was, that they were going to be giving 70% away, 70% of the tokens to the users, who could then use their tokens to support websites, and that eventually, they say, they're going to be allowing it to be used to buy gift cards and other types of rewards for yourself. And Chris, when I read that, my first impression was the exact opposite of what I think they probably wanted me to feel, which was, it's like, well, this sucks. I mean, I can't use the tokens in any way. I mean, aren't consumers just like me for the most part, though? I mean, aren't we all just a little bit selfish about how we spend tokens until we realize, oh, this could help someone?
You mean you're not going to give it to creators for everything that you do? I wish people would, right? Yeah. By the way, I thought some of the articles I read about this, that what they were going to give cryptocurrency. Is that not correct? Or are they just doing kind of a generic?
They're just doing generic
token?
tokens. They're doing tokens that are.
Okay, there was
have
some
a
news in the
sign.
crypto circles that this is a cryptocurrency exchange, and so my concern was that the crypto people were just going to go, great, I'll watch a few ads and get whatever like billionth of a Bitcoin I could go ahead and get. But if it matters anymore, I guess. But if it's just simply a raw token,
it's conceivable that they're going to use a blockchain to manage this system, which I could totally believe them doing that. But I don't believe that it's based on any kind of cryptocurrency that currently exists.
Some bad reporting, but yeah. So, it's funny. This whole thing, though, just reminded me. I play this one like word game, this puzzle game, and you basically can get coins that help you solve the puzzle. So it's basically like a crossword. So it'll give you like a letter when you need one. You could kind of buy it, and you got to watch these little like 15-second ads. And of course, everyone, I would guess, like myself, just tunes out, doesn't pay attention to the ad, lets it end, clicks the OK, gets your credits, and then you go ahead and kind of continue playing your game. And I can rarely ever tell you who the advertiser was, except for I think Pinterest was running some ads on it. But beyond that, it wasn't really that interesting. And, I think anybody who kind of plays this, I'll give you X credits if you watch this ad. The ad, is it really the right audience? Do they care about what's happening there? Is it a good way to go ahead and create contained exposure for a very brief moment? Sure, it does that, but it's all about, is there relevancy within that kind of ad unit, and are you reaching that right kind of person? And just going ahead and earning tokens probably isn't the most important thing to the advertiser, whether someone gets them or not gets them, or what they even do with those tokens. The advertiser cares if that person's really going to react to their ad and hopefully respond to it in some way. So, the token piece, it can be usable. It does work within the gaming example I just gave. It can work, I guess, within the browsing kind of example. If you want to reduce kind of what's happening in your ad footprint while you're browsing by participating in a ad unit on occasion and earning tokens to, credit yourself so you don't have to go ahead and see more and reward content creators or do whatever else the token allows you to go ahead and do. Yeah, it could work, but it just feels like such a minute, small, niche kind of consumer that I'm guessing Google has nothing to worry about.
And that's always the way we summarize these arguments. Is always comes down to, does it hurt Google?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Am I really going to change my browser to get some tokens? I don't know what I'm supposed to do with them. Probably not. But maybe there's some added security thing that's really heavy here. But it seems like it's not just a security.
Well, but that's a really great point there, right at the end. This idea of, does the token just solidify an existing audience, or could it potentially attract new consumers? And I'm with you. I don't think this is going to attract anybody to become a Brave browser user in any kind of measurable way. I'm sure there's somebody out there. There always is, but I can't imagine this being a mass movement to the Brave browser because you're going to be able to get tokens. This is more about solidifying the existing user base, right?
But Bob, we are talking about it, right? So it's got to be working.
Colby, any thoughts on that? Do you believe that this is going to attract any new users to the platform?
Oh gosh. It could. Like I said, there's some adoption now. I don't know if these are new users, but I think time will tell. I'm not really good at predicting the future. So,
come on, you're in
guess
charge
is
of
as good as
business
mine,
intelligence. You should be able to be this super predictor, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's got a chance at the end of the day, but I think it's got a ways to go.
Well, I want to go.
Wait a second here, Colby. Weren't you an ex Gartner guy? Your whole job was predicting the future before, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, for this last topic, I just need to preamble here, and I want to state clearly right at the beginning that this is not an actual rollout. I am not reporting that Instagram is actually doing this. It's just a reported test, but Instagram is currently considering eliminating the visibility of like counts on their app. So while an individual will still be able to see how many people liked a post, thank God, we wouldn't want to lose the ability to see how many people liked our Instagram post. This number would then be hidden from other people viewing a user's page. And my question, Lynn, is this good for the democratization of the platform? Is it a good, solid use case for doing something like this that would make the site, oh, I don't know, more egalitarian, and it'd be easier to source new content because you wouldn't be liking on top of major posts or measuring the success against one post against another post or whatever? I mean, it's just like, does this help in any way?
Yeah, help, I don't know, but I think it's interesting. I think, the article talked that said that, they were considering doing this pilot, talked about, well, we want people to focus on the content and not the likes. But if it feels like, okay, are they doing this to sort of be altruistic to get people to stop feeling such peer pressure and feel such, FOMO and all that stuff? Probably not.
Oh, 1 second, Lynn, you put something on top of your microphone.
Oh, can you hear me? Sorry.
I can hear you now. Go ahead, keep
Okay.
talking.
No, I was just saying, like, are they really trying to be altruistic? Because, doing this to kind of help people have a bigger, purpose on their interaction with social media. I doubt it. I think at the end of the day, it's never can happen because likes are like crack, for many people and many influencers, and it's the way they're measured. And
But
you take that away,
no, but the influencers will still be able to see their own likes. I mean, God forbid we take
their
away the
own
likes
likes,
from,
their own likes. But isn't so much of it about how other people see you? Isn't that a big part of what, people get off on?
yes, absolutely. I agree with you. I just wanted to be clear that we were talking about the same thing. So yeah, absolutely. I think that this is going to fundamentally change the way the platform works in some potentially good ways from a user standpoint, because your post could potentially raise up a little bit easier as opposed to being smothered by that million liked post that's constantly getting fed into into the explore tab. But at the same time, if you can't generate that kind of viral success, Colby, if you can't get to that and try to, you can't use those like counts to inspire people to like your post and to think, wow, this is really important and this is impressive, I should pay attention to it. If we take that away, does Instagram lose a little cachet in terms of its advertising and influencer marketing value?
Well, certainly, Len just said that the brands that are hiring influencers to market on their behalf will certainly need that data. I think if you're an influencer and your business is making money and proving the fact that you've got value, there will be ways around broadcasting how many likes or comments you're getting to your content. So, at the end of the day, money talks. And, my guess is that this is a nice little test for Instagram to feel like they're doing something nice for the user to say, hey, stop focusing on this. But at the end of the day, I think the brands that are working with these individuals are going to require this data, and I know that the influencer has it. So my guess is this will be a short-lived test, and it won't last for all the reasons that Len suggested.
Chris, do you agree? Do you think that this is just going to be a laboratory test and it'll never be rolled out, or is this something that really predicts a future state for Instagram? And what would you predict that future state would be?
This is why I love this show. And that's not a kiss ass thing, but oops.
Well,
sorry.
thank you.
Kiss butt thing. So Lynn made a really great point here that I really hadn't looked at, because I was looking at it through that brand influencer vetting process that we're mostly talking about right now, which is I like to go ahead and understand an influencer, not just by their follower count, but also how people are engaging with them. It also gives you some idea, theoretically, of whether there's a lot of fake followers within that account. Of course, you could also fake the likes too, so engagement's also fake. So who knows? You can fake a lot of things on Instagram. But at the end of the day, I think what Lynn said was really interesting. If it truly is altruistic change, it does get out of this whole competition that I believe is probably something that is happening with probably a younger generation that cares about it more, or that goes back to see who their friends are, who's engaging with their friends, how are they engaging with them. how is my enemy or my ex engaging, and all this other kind of stuff that's out there that you can really see within these open platforms. And if you're following people and not, you could get an idea of what's happening with that in that engagement space that tells you something about maybe somebody's popularity or the interest in something that they've shared, and that might be causing some jealousy or some kind of issues across the board inside the social circles. And so if it really is kind of about removing this whole like gaming piece that's maybe is creating a lot of angst, if you will, then that could be a very good thing. And at the end of the day, we as marketers are still going to be able to go ahead and get the engagement numbers from influencers that we want to work with, because they can still see that and provide that. And really, I don't think anyone really cares what the marketers are getting out of the Instagram thing, except for the marketers and the companies trying to promote in there. But this could be a good change that really tries to move this into just being about nice content sharing and not being this competitive who's got the best and most engaged accounts, which might be creating some animosity that Instagram's maybe is noticed in focus groups or in some of the negative things that have come out of the social space.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Something positive here.
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because I think you are right. There is a certain element of this community that's being hurt by this constant competition for the like counts, and that could potentially fix that problem. But at the same time, if it hurts the advertising portion of things, Instagram's in deep trouble. I mean, this is something that they depend on, and they're extremely effective at selling their ads to this audience. I mean, you don't want to piss off this audience at all. Well, with that, it's time for the Ad Fail 5. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do some shameless plugs, starting with Chris Backus. You can find him at Westfield. I'm not really sure what the website to give for because there's a few of them, but he's the VP of Digital there. Tell us what's going on in your world, Chris. What would you like to promote?
Hey, so I'm going to help a good friend of mine who used to be a business partner years ago. His name's Eric Bowe, and he just launched his book last month called Primal Shopper, and it's been great. I've been going through it about a third of the way through it myself, and really great insights on how people buy, and really love Eric's perspective. So I thought I'd throw it out there. It's out on Amazon, so you can check it out there. Otherwise, everything else is great, and enjoying a new job at URW Westfield. So thanks.
Dang, that's fantastic. Yeah, definitely throw a link if you have one. Maybe we'll put it in the show notes. Lynn Power, you can find her at thehmsbeagle.com. You can also find her at Missamy, which I know nothing about, so I'm sure she'll tell you about it. But tell us what's going on in your world, Lynn. What would you like to promote?
Hey, thanks. So the HMS Beagle is a brand consultancy that helps brands navigate the journey to survival, which these days is not a given. My partner, Joseph Jaffe, just wrote a book kind of in that vein called Built to Suck. And just for clarification, Masami is one of our projects. It is a hair care company brand that we're launching, created with a proprietary Japanese ocean botanical, and it's been a really awesome project to work on. Can't wait to launch it in about 6 weeks.
Speaking of Instagram, I see your pictures from Japan all the time. You're a world traveler with that company.
Exactly. Then now you know why.
And finally, we have Colby Vogt. You can find him at DeVriesGlobal.com. That's the home of DeVries, where he is the EVP of business intelligence, right? Did I get that right, Colby?
You got it.
So tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to promote?
Yeah. So, the exciting thing is we're actually in early stages at DeVries of doing a really comprehensive study of Gen Z and really what makes them tick and how they're different from other generations. And we're really excited about this. I imagine this is something that will probably be available in 4 to 6 weeks or so. And but we've seen some really interesting stuff early on, and we're excited about it.
That sounds great. You'll have to send me a link when it comes out. I would love to see that. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can even find out how to advertise on the program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for the Ad Fail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. And first up, Facebook is in it again. In fact, you should probably cue the what's her name? The Oops, I Did It Again girl, Britney Spears. But leaked documents show that not only were they exposing private information, Lynn, but founder Mark Zuckerberg was actively using the personal information of competitors to give himself business advantages and help friends. In one way you can't blame them, but I mean, if you're a competitor of Facebook and you're putting information on Facebook, that sounds like a really stupid move, but this is not cool what he is doing, is it?
No, and it's like, did these guys ever learn? He's had enough, he's gotten beat up enough about privacy. You think that he would think twice about this and go, maybe this isn't a good idea. But it kind of goes to show you, I don't think he cares that much about it. I really don't. And that's scary. And that's scary considering, how much data and information and stuff is there. So, yeah, I just think look, for him to, it just makes me feel like he's kind of evil and sad.
You heard it here first, people, or maybe you didn't hear it here first. Either way. Now, next up, a Vice report shares a story about an all-hands meeting at Twitter, Chris, where an engineer there explained that the reason artificial intelligence couldn't eliminate white supremacy content from the platform in the same way that it works already for eliminating Islamic State content was that they had too many false positives for Republican congressional content. When you read this, you just go, oh my God.
Really? False positives? I beg to differ. But who knows? I mean, it's all, I'm sure, about terminology and trying to sequence multiple things that kind of sound the same. I can see that. I'll just leave it at that.
My head is shaking. I wish everybody could see this. Anyway, next up, Ancestry.com has pulled an ad that tried to explain why some people of African heritage have Caucasian DNA, Colby. The tone-deaf effort ignores the realities of both slavery and the rape that went along with it, instead showing us a kindly 19th century white man trying to convince an equally attractive black woman to run away with him to get married. It's just like such a lovely picture that was probably not true at all.
Yeah, just a reminder to test that content, right? Like, I don't know who approved it or whose idea it was, but I have to imagine if they had any type of panel to just test it, someone would have probably raised their hand and said, let's think twice. So just that subtle reminder to test what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, next up, camera maker Leica is in a hot water in China. One of a series of new ads, Lynn, showcasing the bravery of photographers, celebrated the person who captured the Tiananmen Tank Man moment. You know, that famous picture where the man confronted tanks in Tiananmen Square during the protests. A moment that the Chinese government has worked really, 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 really hard to suppress. But the real fail here is that the company, in response to this, has decided to claim that the ad was simply unauthorized. I'm just saying, this is one of the most ballless things I've ever seen a brand do. I understand that the Chinese market is important to you, but come on, this is reality here.
Well, I just find that the irony was that this was all supposed to be about bravery. And then when push comes to shove, they completely waffle and totally are like, it's not our fault. So super lame. And obviously they're getting called out on that.
Maybe they need tokens since they have some brave problems. Oh, see what I did there. Okay. Now, last but not least, you really wanted in on the agency business, Accenture. You really wanted to be there, didn't you? Well, Hertz is suing the management consultancy for $32 million over a failed effort to redesign the car rental company's website, Chris. And the story here, as you pull it apart, is just phenomenal when you see how many errors the company made in trying to produce this site for them. Is this a sign of what's to come with the management consultancies, or is this just kind of like one example of bad work being done and somebody getting sued over it?
Oh, this story was a nightmare. Oh my goodness. I also love it was written in the Register UK, and my favorite line of the whole story was Hertz cried into its legal pillow. So you go ahead and grab your legal pillow today, guys, whenever you have a legal issue. Hopefully it's not on a $32 million website. This just seemed like one of those really, really bad projects. Hopefully it's not a label against the company and the organization. Everyone has bad projects. This is a pretty significant disaster. A lot of disconnect on what was agreed on, and a lot of change order reports that were very offensive to the client. So offensive they eventually had to go to the legal pillow. So terrible story. Very entertaining to read after having done development projects in my past, and I hope Hertz finds a better partner going forward.
Yeah, either that or Accenture gets better at doing what they're doing. One or the other should happen.
Yeah, that too.
Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag AdFail5. That's pound, AdFail, and the number 5. Well, that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, Stitcher, Anchor, whatever, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment, have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
It's like, you know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.